All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I am your host, Marcus Whitman. Today we're going to be recapping a phenomenal wildcard round of football in the NFL. We're going to be previewing the divisional round, picking all those games. We're going to talk about Doug Pederson because we got to talk about Doug Pederson. And then we have a huge bag of mail because we didn't have a show last week because of the prediction show and the mock draft. So piling up some of those mailbag questions here for this episode. It's going to be a good one. Before we get started, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by my Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can not just support the show, but become a part of it by gaining access to the mailbag for the show, where I answer your questions at the end of each episode. But not just that. In my opinion, this is the best time to sign up for my Patreon, because if you enjoy my draft content on YouTube as we transition into NFL draft season, you can get the full TFG Draft Insider package there on Patreon, where you're going to get access to film breakdowns. I actually have 2 up there right now on Zach Wilson, so you can go check those out right now. I've got my quarterback profile listings on there where I have in-depth reviews and profiles on all the quarterbacks. I'm going to be posting my comprehensive NFL draft board that come draft day is hopefully going to have grades and evaluations on over 500 players. Leading up to April, you'll get team-specific 7-round mock drafts. So again, guys, you're going to want to check out my Patreon if you like my draft content, and you'll support this show and my channel in the process. So that's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. All right, where should we start? Let's start with Doug freaking Pederson, man. I have been screaming for the Eagles to let go of Doug Pederson for a couple of months now. And it reached a boiling point about last week where they had actually said, after the season ended, and he basically openly tanked the final game of the season, pulled Jalen Hurts in the fourth quarter to put in Nate Sudfeld, who's a journeyman backup. I know he's been there in Philadelphia, but he's nothing more than a low-end backup, not going to come in and win you the game. And it reached a boiling point after that where I was like, I've liked the Eagles as a team, right? Those of you that have been around this channel know that I like teams that do things the right way. Like, I'm going to root for teams that aren't stupid. And I tend to not like the teams that I feel like I could actually do a better job running. And the Eagles, for a while there, were one of those teams that I really respected as an organization. I thought they did the right things. They played free agency well. They made aggressive trades. They drafted well. They understood the importance of the quarterback position. They built a really great staff. They did some really great things that helped them get to win a Super Bowl. But the last couple years, this thing has fallen apart. And when they said they were going to be keeping Doug Pederson after, in my opinion, just the eye test showed that Doug Pederson, as an offensive coordinator / offensive guru that he's supposed to be, was one of the worst in the league, if not the worst. No team in the NFL, and this is not a real stat, but if it was, I guarantee you this would be true. No team led the NFL more than the Eagles in snap to what the hell are we doing plays. Like, total dysfunction, linemen don't know who's blocking, sometimes the quarterback's handing it to the wrong guy, the receivers aren't doing the right things on screens or routes. Just a complete mess. And the scheme itself, when they did know what they were supposed to do, was not very good. So I thought it was such a no-brainer decision to fire Doug Pederson. And about a week ago, they said, no, we're going to bring him back. And it felt very similar to like what the Packers did with Mike McCarthy, where he got all this early success, but he wasn't able to replicate it. And because he won a Super Bowl, they just held on to him for way too long. And it felt like they were going that route with Doug Pederson and coming up with more and more excuses for the guy. But about, 3 days ago? I think this was on Sunday, right? Maybe Saturday. It came out that they were going to fire Doug Pederson. And they basically had a standoff between ownership, coach, and Carson Wentz, I think, played a role in this. But basically, they were telling Doug Pederson certain things he had to do with his staff. Doug Pederson thought he was above having to take orders. And they were like, all right, whatever. Like, we're sick of this. Like, get out of here, Doug. We're going to go a different way. And I think it also played a factor that about 3 weeks ago, Carson Wentz, or his agent, said that the relationship between Doug Pederson and Carson Wentz was irreparable, that he wanted a trade, and it was either Carson Wentz or Doug Pederson. And, Wentz has not been great, to say the least, especially this year. But he is definitely a more valuable asset than Doug Pederson, right? He's a guy that has had an MVP caliber season. He's had some phenomenal games that have helped this team be a playoff team if you look back like last season. And there's a lot of talent there that I think is going untapped because of Doug Pederson. Now, I think that he's kind of broken right now, and you don't want to lean on him too much, but I would definitely rather have Carson Wentz as an asset than Doug Pederson. So I think they made the right decision there. And I'm giving the Eagles more of a chance now. And I'm really intrigued to what kind of coach they're going to hire. They've been interviewing some defensive guys and other. Actually, as I sit down here right now, I think they're requesting to interview Todd Bowles, the defense coordinator for the Bucs. I don't think that's the right way to go. I think they could have a really good defense with Todd Bowles. Personnel-wise, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Their pass rushers between not the interior guys, but the edge guys, looking at Brandon Graham, you're looking at Derek Barnett, and you're looking at Sweat. And all these guys are 4'3", bigger body defensive ends. That doesn't make a ton of sense for me with Todd Bowles, who I think would probably have to change his scheme if he was going to work well with the guys in Philadelphia. But one guy they are interviewing is Arthur Smith, offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. He was right up there at the top of my list of the Coaching Carousel podcast that I did. And I think it makes so much sense from a personnel standpoint. This is the guy that saved Ryan Tannehill, right? And you can make some comparisons between Wentz and Tannehill. Now, Tannehill was kind of bad and flushed out of Miami because he was too conservative. He didn't make enough big plays. He didn't have that it factor about him. Carson Wentz more has the it factor, but needs to be reined in a little bit and play a little more conservative and in structure. But the narrative is still the same, like a quarterback that needs things, I'll just say, dumbed down and schemed up for him. And then you can utilize the skill sets that the quarterback has as far as mobility, arm talent, downfield accuracy, package that almost vicariously through the offensive play caller in a way that can limit their weaknesses as far as the mental side of the game, if that makes sense. And I think when you look at both, I struggle with this, Wentz and Hurts, both those guys totally fit the Arthur Smith, Shanahan, Kubiak offense that we talk about every single episode, it feels like, where you are setting up play action and easy first reads off of play action due to a dominant outside zone run game. And just looking at this roster, and I won't go too far into this because they haven't even hired Arthur Smith yet, but you look at this roster, you get the offensive line back with Lane Johnson, who's one of the best move-blocking offensive tackles in the league, paired with Jason Kelce, who, yes, up there in age, is still a phenomenal blocker on the move. Brandon Brooks, who is a total mauler. You have Andre Dillard, who's a great athlete at left tackle, who I think would really thrive in this scheme. And then left guard, they could figure someone out. But the blocking would be great. You have your, call it a Dalvin Cook in this offense. I think Miles Sanders has some of that explosive Dalvin Cook aspect to his game. He can give you that home run threat in a system that is designed to have the potential for these runs to really hit it big and become home run hitting runs. That's why you see Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry with these 200, 250-yard games, because some of them, they get the right blocking, and they're on the edge. All they have to do is make one guy miss, and they're gone because they have that breakaway speed. I mean, Miles Sanders can totally be that in this run game. And then you look at, pairing that with the mobility and down vertical passing ability of both, Wentz and Hurts, and you have Jalen Reagor, maybe you draft Jamar Chase to be your A.J. Brown here, to be your Deebo Samuel here, that crossing routes, unbelievably good run after catch threat. Jalen Reagor would benefit from this scheme because his route tree doesn't have to be well versed. He doesn't have to do a lot. You can scheme up touches. I mean, it just makes so much sense. And if they go Arthur Smith, I'm going to have to hold myself back on hyping up the Eagles again because it really does make that much sense. So that's my Eagles breakdown. They floated Lincoln Riley out there. It's not a bad hire. I like Lincoln Riley. I worry right now. I mean, their number one priority is they need to figure out the quarterback situation here, whether it's Wentz, Hurts, or drafting a guy. They have that number 6 pick. I don't think Wentz or Hurts are going to be a quick distributing West Coast style quarterback. I don't think that fits either of their play styles. So, Lincoln Riley running more of an offense, probably more similar to Doug Pederson, just at a much higher level. Wouldn't be a bad hire. I do think they need to go with an offensive hire. Hire offensive coaches. It's really that simple. Unless you're a team like Washington or Detroit, where you're just trying to raise the floor of your organization, a defensive coach could make sense there. But if you're like the Eagles and your thought here is we want to win a Super Bowl sooner rather than later, hire an offensive coach. So good for the Eagles for firing Doug Pederson is basically what I'm getting at. I didn't think they were going to do it. I was screaming for months and months that they had to do this, that he was holding this team back, and that I was getting very frustrated with this Eagles team that I have stood my neck out for. It's a team that I have respected over the last 5 years or so. But I had officially lost that respect when they said they were keeping Doug Pederson. Well, now the roads are back open for this team, and I'm really curious to see what they can do. You have a GM that's very much in the hot seat with Howie Roseman. He's kind of like Carson Wentz, where he had some phenomenal seasons as a general manager, and he's had some real freaking stinkers. Like the J.J. Arcega-Whiteside pick is one of the worst draft decisions other than Mitch Trubisky for the Bears and Leonard Fournette for the Jags. Go back the last 5 years. That pick was never a good pick. DK Metcalf was on the board. That was one of the worst picks of the last 5 years for sure. But I'm really excited to see where the Eagles go. Let's get into the wild card breakdowns now. Such a great weekend of football. I mean, other than the Bears game, all these games were really fun. The Steelers-Browns game, there was some moments in there where it wasn't all that entertaining. But really from the first quarter through, first, third, and fourth quarter of the Browns-Steelers game was really entertaining. But let's get into it. We're just going to go in order. Colts versus the Bills. And let's start with the away team, the Indianapolis Colts. And this wrapped up a really good season for the Colts. As far as this game went, Phillip Rivers was good, probably good enough to say we feel right about bringing Rivers back as a high floor starting caliber quarterback. The offense did what they could. It was a solid day of offense. The tight ends really got going here. Mo Alley Cox, Jack Doyle, and then you had Trey Burton has had a really nice season, probably earning himself some money on the open market this year after getting out of the dark pits of the Chicago Bears. And then Michael Pittman was really solid. T.Y. Hilton, not so much in this game. He's an impending free agent. They'll have to figure out what they want to do with him. And then defensively, they were who they've been all year, which is a ton of zone coverage, good, not great pass rush, kind of keep everything in front of you and limit big plays. And that's exactly what I thought would happen. I will say I actually, if you go back to my playoff predictions video, nailed this game on the head. I predicted 27-24 for the Buffalo Bills and basically said that the Colts were going to come up with a good game plan. I thought that the spread was too high, that they were a team that is capable of playing a close game, but when all was said and done, it kind of felt like a game where they were going to be playing keep up too much because they aren't elite on either side of the ball, and the Bills are elite on offense. And that's been my, I suppose, criticism of the Colts all season long. And I've gotten a stigma all of a sudden from Colts Nation, who's been incredibly hostile this year, by the way. But people think I'm like this Colts hater. And I just was calling it all year. I was like, I don't hate the Colts. I think they're a really good football team. I think they can hang with teams like the Bills. But I've talked about this before. I look at every team from a lens of how are we going to win a Super Bowl? And I said the Colts don't have an elite defense. They don't have an elite defense. I'm sorry. They don't. We'll talk about that in a second. And they certainly don't have an elite offense. They have a good offense. They have a good defense. They're well coached. They're well disciplined. But they don't have that next gear. This was like a Corvette trying to keep pace with a Ferrari in this game. Corvette's a nice car. The Colts are a nice run team, but they are not a great team. They don't do one thing at an elite level, and when you get into the playoffs, you need to have that next gear somewhere, whether it's defense or whether it's offense, and that's what the Colts need to figure out, and why I'm so intrigued by their offseason. I love Chris Ballard as a general manager. He has done such a good job to fill this roster out with depth and really raise the floor of this team, but now he's got to take that next step and start to establish some elite talent here. And the DeForest Buckner trade was the first step in doing that. It's difficult to become an elite team overnight, especially when you don't have an elite quarterback, which they obviously don't. But they got to continue to do stuff like that. It's very clear that offensively, when you have Philip Rivers as your quarterback and you don't have like elite playmakers, you're going to have limits on offense. But they're not a bad offense. And defensively, you have DeForest Buckner as an elite game-changing defensive player. I think he has taken a step up as a player to get to that level. But one player isn't enough to do that. They're solid everywhere else. And I'm sorry, Darius Leonard truthers, but by the nature of the position he plays and the style that he plays with, Darius Leonard is not an elite game-changing player. He's an excellent linebacker. He is, he went to the All-Pro team. I don't think he's one of the 4 best linebackers in the NFL. I think he's one of the 7 best linebackers in the NFL. But, if you want to be an elite game-changing defense, you either do it through an electric pass rush or elite coverage. And Darius Leonard doesn't really bring any of that. He's a great blitzer, but then you're sacrificing some coverage. He's not a great coverage linebacker. He's not a bad cover linebacker, but he's not Kendricks or, Levante David or even Fred Warner. He doesn't get that depth in his drops. He bites the cheese on play action. He's very aggressive. He doesn't have the elite athleticism to man guys up. He's not a bad cover player, but he's not a game-changing coverage player in the sense that like Eric Kendricks he'll take things out in the middle of the field. Like if there's a great play. It's a great example I like to go to is the Vikings are running cover 2, which the Colts run a ton of. And the Packers tried to run Devontae Adams right up the seam, which is a weakness against cover 2. And Eric Kendricks, a linebacker, was running stride for stride with Devontae Adams, something a lot of cornerbacks have shown they can't do, and got his head around and deflected a perfectly thrown ball up the seam. Like, that is an example of how you can be an elite game-changing linebacker, and Darius Leonard he doesn't do that. He's a very good run defender, he's a very good linebacker, but he just isn't an elite game-changing player. No one in that secondary is an elite game-changing player. They're very solid. I like Xavier Rhodes. I like Julian Blackmon. I like Kari Willis. Very solid, but you don't have Jair Alexander, Jalen Ramsey, like nuts corner that he's taken receivers out of the game. They don't have that. Not out of the game, but that's kind of the shutdown corner is kind of dead. But shifting that balance in your favor. Let's just say that. So the Colts offseason is going to be all about what can they do to become a Super Bowl contending team where they have something on this team that they do at an elite level. And to me, there's 2 routes for them to do that. And the most efficient way to do that is quarterback. I think they do bring Philip Rivers back. I don't know why you wouldn't. Like, he raises the floor of this team. We very clearly saw that. They would be a playoff team again with Philip Rivers. But they got to do something. They got to get aggressive to try and get a quarterback. And, whether that's trading for Sam Darnold, whether it's trading up in the draft like teams like the Bills did for Josh Allen, like the Colts did for Patrick Mahomes, whether it's, calling Green Bay about Jordan Love or something like that. They have to do something to get an elite quarterback option here. I don't think that it's the kid out of Washington that they drafted last year with a rocket arm who can't move. Maybe. What's his name? His name's escaping me. Jacob Eason. He's got a rocket arm. I don't think he's ever going to be an elite quarterback, but he's an interesting player. But that would be the most efficient way to do that, is to get kind of lucky with one of these quarterbacks. Maybe they trade up for Trey Lance and he works out, or they go trade for Carson Wentz or Sam Darnold. They're able to fix him. there's these kind of risky assets at the quarterback position that can become available to a team like the Colts. Patrick Mahomes was a risky player. He was a boom or bust prospect coming out. Josh Allen, same thing. But those teams had a vision for how they were going to turn those guys into game-wrecking quarterbacks. I think the Colts are a team that it's time for them to, kind of set all of their other things aside. Like the rest of this roster, yeah, they'll keep doing little pieces. They don't need to just put it on autopilot, but they're pretty set across the board. Anthony Costanzo just retired. They need to find an answer at left tackle, sure. But for the most part, they need to either get a quarterback here or you bring Rivers back with crowd noise next year. You try to make this an elite defense. And like I said, the way to get an elite defense is elite players as pass rushers and cover players. So who can they get? I don't know. Can they get a Carl Lawson from Cincinnati? Can they, sign J.C. Jackson, who's not a great scheme fit for this zone-heavy team? Maybe a Richard Sherman. Roll the dice on him, see if he can still play. I don't know what the answer would be. That's a lot harder because one player probably isn't going to take this from a good defense to an elite defense. But ultimately, if you could make this a game-changing defense, all of a sudden the 20 to 24 points a week that you're getting from Phillip Rivers in this offense, all of a sudden that looks a lot better when you can consistently hold your opponents to 17 points as opposed to the 24 to 27 that they've been doing this year. So that's my outlook on the Colts. But anyway, for the Bills in this game, not nearly as much to say. What I keep saying about this Bills team is they just keep coming. They were slow to start in this game. The Colts came out with a good game plan. The Bills didn't really have too much of a run game in this one, and I thought they were being a little bit too stubborn, trying to run the ball a little bit too much early, and they just kept coming, and you can only keep Josh Allen and this receiving core down for so long. I think the biggest difference with Josh Allen is not so much that he doesn't make mistakes, because there's still mistakes in there. He's still not a flawed player, but he's far from a perfect decision maker. But the difference is, if he has one of those bad decisions, it's not like the last couple years where they keep compounding and things spiral out of control. He's able to just kind of brush it off and come back to being this borderline elite quarterback that he's been this year. I mean, he really has been spectacular. You're seeing all of the physical traits come together with the mental side of the things, and there's so little to say about the Bills because it's so easy to see how awesome this offense has been all year long, and that's really all I have to add. I'm excited to see this team go against the Baltimore Ravens and kind of that matchup between Lamar and that run style versus the Bills and this passing offense. We'll get into the previews, but even more so, can Josh Allen truly go head-to-head with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and give us that 75-point shootout that it looks like it could be? And if Josh Allen were to win that game, things really get real about, is he really on Patrick Mahomes' level? Because honestly, as far as turnover-worthy mistakes and stuff and stupid throws, the things that we've really, bagged on Josh Allen over the years, Allen for a long time was doubly worse than Mahomes as far as rate of making stupid throws. But this season is pretty damn close. There's not a huge difference between 2020 Josh Allen and 2020 Patrick Mahomes. And I got so much crap, by the way. I'm not trying to say it's a great take or anything. But last year, the middle of last year, I tweeted something about Josh Allen. I think I said, really makes you wonder. I should go back and pull this thing up, but really makes you wonder what would have happened if Josh Allen ended up on the Chiefs. And everyone was like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. How dare you say Josh Allen is as good as Patrick Mahomes? And it's obviously it's not what I was saying, but we're seeing now Josh Allen developing with help around him and a ton of help at receiver, just like Patrick Mahomes has had. And all of a sudden, there could be a real conversation about not necessarily who's better. I think Allen needs to prove more than Mahomes has before we start saying he's better than Patrick Mahomes. But, I mean, really, you stack up their seasons next to each other, incredibly similar. The spectacular plays are there, 100%. The kind of mental mistakes that come with more of that gunslinger mentality that if I make a mistake here, I'll come back in the next drive and beat you for a 60-yard bomb. That's been there. The elite play extension, pocket presence, like both guys, phenomenal. I would say Josh Allen's kind of pocket presence is actually better than Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes drops back too far and does some stuff that puts his offensive line at a disadvantage, whereas Josh Allen is much more comfortable kind of feeling that pocket and navigating pressure. So I'm not ready to say Josh Allen is better than Patrick Mahomes, but I want to see that matchup because I think it would be the beginning of that conversation, which is just crazy that we're at this point because Josh Allen had some really, rough learning curves. Let's just say that. But yeah, Bills were great. Excited to see them continue this season that's been just a riot for them. All right, moving on to the Rams-Seahawks. This was another game that I predicted. I predicted the upset in this game, the Rams over the Seahawks. And even as it led up to the week, I originally took the stance of if Goff is in, I'm taking the Rams. If it's Wolford, I'm taking the Seahawks. But even as it got closer and it became kind of a game-time decision there, I still stuck by the Rams because the Seahawks are just kind of in disarray offensively. We'll talk about them. The Rams match up so well with Aaron Donald, the way he's able to disrupt against a pretty poor Seahawks interior offensive line, get to Russell Wilson. And this is the third game that Russell Wilson has shown like he's not good against this Rams defense because they are, I'm not going to say they built this defense to specifically beat Russell Wilson, but I think the play style of the Seahawks is the type of offense that the Rams are trying to take away, in that they want to keep everything in front of them. They play a ton of too high safety. They know that they can get pressure with Aaron Donald and not blitzing a ton. And that's a problem for the Seahawks because they eat off of those big plays, and the Rams limit them better than anybody. And it's not like, not trying to hate on the Colts here, but it's a great example for what I'm trying to say. It's not like the Colts where they're going to rush 4, maybe they blitz here or there, but for the most part, they're going to play cover 2, they're going to play cover 3, some cover 4, they're going to rush 4, and, their pass rush just isn't really going to hit home because they're rushing 4, but they're still going to limit those big plays and have a good day on defense. Well, the Rams can rush 4 and dominate because of Aaron Donald. And if you still think TJ Watt is the defensive player of the year after watching Wildcard Weekend, and I know that they vote on these things before the playoffs start, but this is the case I've been trying to make. Like, Aaron Donald destroys games. They won this game because of what Aaron Donald did in the first half. He is the most valuable and the most impactful non-quarterback in the NFL, and he has been for about 5 years. TJ Watt got shut down by a backup right tackle. And Aaron Donald is constantly getting double teamed. TJ Watt is incredible. He is quite possibly the best edge rusher in the league right now. If not number 1, he's in the top 3. But he is just not in the same class as Aaron Donald. He just isn't. If you don't see that, I don't know what to tell you. And it showed in this game. Aaron Donald took over. Now, he left with a core injury in this game. He didn't even play in the second half, but his first half was enough for this team. He left with a core injury in this game. Nothing's going to keep him out of the game next week, but that could be big if he's a little banged up and not 100%, because I do think that their style on defense really is surrounded on Aaron Donald dominating. And then you got Jalen Ramsey, who matches up well with DK Metcalf. We've talked about that before. But yeah, man, the Rams just dominant defense, and Sean McVay was the better coach than Pete Carroll in this game, which was the other reason I liked the Rams in this game, is that I think good coaches like Sean McVay and Andy Reid and Sean Payton, I think they save a little extra for the playoffs, especially if you're in. And we saw these two teams play very recently. The Rams were very much in the playoffs. I'm not saying that he lost the game on purpose or didn't want to win. But I do think that when you play a team 3 times and they know that they're likely to play a team like this, or even if they don't play the Seahawks, they're still showing that tape to other teams. I think a good coach like Sean McVay is going to come with that little extra something come playoff time. And they didn't do anything terribly different that I noticed up front, so that could just be a theory and a miss of a take. But very clearly, the Rams came out and had a much better game of offense, whether it was Walford or Jared Goff in this game. It didn't really seem to matter. They were getting some really nice looks on the typical play action stuff that they do. So I'd have to really dive in to see if they were doing anything differently schematically that Seattle wasn't prepared for. But very clearly, they made it work in this game and had a better offense than the Seahawks in this game because of the defensive matchup, where the Seahawks are just kind of squishy on defense. Their defensive line is not that good. Seahawks fans were coming at me when I said that the Seahawks don't have a good pass rush because their sack numbers look good. Well, they've been blitzing a ton, and Jamal Adams is their sack leader. Well, you know what happens when you blitz Jamal Adams? Yeah, that curl flat is now wide open because your strong safety's not there. And, well, look at where a lot of those throws were. So the Seahawks just don't have a good natural pass rush, and the Rams took advantage of it. Their defensive line is just not all that great. Like, the Rams were able to run the ball in this game. Cam Akers was awesome. Good on the Rams. They got a huge win against the Seahawks. And we'll see what they can do against the Packers. I think the Packers match up a lot differently, a lot better. I think, we'll get into that game later. But let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks, because this is another team that I've really appreciated over the years. You go back to the way they built that Legion of Boom and the way they've drafted, and they've kind of developed on defense. They've just done a lot of great things over the last decade as an organization. They've officially, to me, lost that luster, are in a position that they're not making the changes that it's time to make. Like, the game has evolved. You're now playing in a division with 2 of the best offensive minds in the league, in the world, with Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. And you're out here with Pete Carroll, who's a great coach. He's probably he's a Hall of Fame coach, right? He's a football Hall of Fame guy. He's had success in college. He's had a lot of success in the NFL. But he's 71 years old, 70 years old, and he's doing the same crap. He came out and said 2 days ago that the Seahawks need to not just run the ball better, but run the ball more. And that's what's holding this team back and they're bringing Schottenheimer back, their offensive coordinator. If this team had Jared Goff as their quarterback, or they had a young rookie like Daniel Jones, or, they didn't have some incredible elite quarterback, I wouldn't be criticizing them of this, because that's kind of what you need to do when you have a quarterback like that. You need to surround them with defense. You need to run the ball. You need to put playmakers in front of them, scheme things open. But you're limiting your ceiling when you do that, right? Because you're eventually going to go against Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, who are just going to come in and wipe the doors off you, and all of a sudden your quarterback can't create and you can't really add anything to the table. Well, you're sitting there with Russell Wilson getting paid $40 million, and you don't want to use him. You don't want to build your system around him. All they want to do is do what Pete Carroll knows, the way he remembers football from the 90s, and he thinks that can win now. And it just can't. Like, it's just time for change. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Pete Carroll has to get fired. That is an extreme thing. I think because of how stubborn he is, it does feel like that is a necessary evil for the ownership to say, like, you know what, Pete, this just isn't working out anymore. If you can't convince him to do things differently. But it's time to change, at the very least, it's time to buy into Russell Wilson. Change your scheme. I think that there's 2 things really holding Russell Wilson back. He had just a really bad second half of the season after being arguably the best quarterback in the NFL for the first half of the season. But there's 2 things really holding him back, and it's been this team's stubbornness to fix the offensive line. They've done some things here or there. It's improved slightly, but and they've had a couple injuries this year, but they drafted Damian Lewis, and they've started him this year. He's not a good pass protector. He's a phenomenal run blocker. I love Damian Lewis, but that's not helping Russell Wilson as a passer, especially if you're not going to run the bootleg Shanahan offense where his run blocking basically becomes his pass blocking because that's the way that those moving pockets work. Is it's not a traditional backwards moving pass set. If you put Damian Lewis in like Minnesota or Tennessee, all of a sudden that his weaknesses as a traditional pass blocker are going to look a little different. But anyway, that's a deep dive. They have not surrounded them with a good offensive line. That's been a huge problem. They've been stubborn about it. They haven't spent money in free agency, other than trading for the left tackle from Houston, who's getting up there in age, by the way. They really haven't done much at all to fix this offensive line. And then beyond that, it is the scheme stuff. They run such an old school, traditional, predictable offense that it holds Russell Wilson back so much. You look around the league, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, like all of the most efficient passers in the league. What are their coordinators doing for them? They're creating easy stuff that gets you to play in rhythm so that, 70% of your throws, I'm making this number up, but such a high percentage of Russell Wilson's plays are high difficulty stuff. It's going through progressions. It's eluding pressure. It's getting out of the pocket. It's making stuff happen. And he's not an elite rhythm passer. He's not a bad rhythm passer. But they don't do anything schematically to truly help Russell Wilson. They don't run a ton of RPOs. They don't, have an efficient, quick-hitting passing game. Because the teams like the Chiefs and the Packers, when, those teams have maybe 4, 5, 6 concepts that they really like and they're comfortable with to, on first down, convert something into, 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 4. The Seahawks' way of doing that is just running the football, just running power, running, duo, whatever they're doing, trap. That's just not modern football. And they don't do anything to really help Russell Wilson. It holds him back, and I think it ended up putting so much pressure on Russell Wilson that those mistakes started to pile up. Now, he's not completely free of blame. He makes some pretty head-scratching mistakes in there. And there was some eye-opening stuff that kind of dropped him off of that top 3 quarterback conversation, I believe. But you're still talking about a guy that's up there with those top 2. You're talking about a guy that's in the Josh Allen conversation, Deshaun Watson. Like, he is obviously an elite quarterback. So it's frustrating for the Seahawks. I'd be very frustrated if I was a Seahawks fan. I'm frustrated as an NFL fan that just wants to see greatness. And I feel like the Seahawks now, without a first-round pick, are headed back towards a 10, 11-win season, maybe win a playoff game. But the second that they go up against a team that does one thing really well or that matches up well with their skill set, like the Rams, like they're just kind of screwed. And I feel bad because that's definitely the way it feels this thing is headed. If they could just go get an Arthur Smith or, I don't know, a Lincoln Riley or something that's going to just modernize this team, it would just boost the ceiling so much because this is not the Legion of Boom anymore. This isn't a team that's going to win games 20-16 consistently. They don't have the firepower on defense, and they're certainly not getting it this offseason. It's not a great year for free agents, and you don't have a first-round pick, so you're not going to have a great defense next year. It could be a good defense, but man, it's just frustrating. All right, Tampa Bay at Washington. This was a fun game. I didn't think this was going to be such a fun game. Taylor Heineke is to thank for that. But really, Tampa Bay, this is legit. Like, they're getting scary. This is what I thought was going to happen. It just took a little bit longer than I thought. I thought they would start really slow, take some time. Tom Brady, such a methodical passer, a guy that needs that chemistry with his receivers. I expected this to take some time. It took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I think that Detroit game was exactly what they needed, where they basically had target practice out there in a dome against a team without their coaches, against an already bad defense. And ever since then, I mean, this offense has just really clicked, and you're seeing it in full force. Whatever you or me or Tony Dungy or whoever, Tony Romo, whatever anybody said about Tom Brady's arm talent and kind of, him being 43 and looking his age, I think there was something to that. Like, you watch his games when he plays in outdoor cold weather games in October, November, it was not pretty. Like, the ball was floating for way too long. It was not coming out. It was coming out with zip, but you couldn't see the downfield vertical accuracy. It just was not working. So there's people like me that were really critical of him at that time. And then there's people that were like, oh, nothing's wrong. He's perfectly fine. But whatever anybody said, I think it's pretty safe to say right now, Tom Brady, for whatever reason, looks back. And it's not that he was never throwing with zip, but he's dropping those balls right in the bucket downfield. And that is scary for the rest of the NFC. And I'm stoked for this rematch against the Saints because I think this Bucs team is a much better team now than they were the last couple times they played. Tom Brady's in a rhythm with this team. This offensive line is just incredible. He just has all day to throw in there. And, they're scary. Defensively, they're good. Taylor Heinicke, though, was just magic against this defense. I don't really know how to explain it. I mean, Heinicke's been around the league. He was a backup in Minnesota. He's been in the the D leagues or whatever. I think he was in the XFL, maybe the AAF. But he's been a backup dude. He's a small school guy. He's always been a kind of intriguing, preseason star that comes in. You can see the athletic traits, but it was always kind of like, all right, he's like 6 feet tall. He's, came out of this tiny school. Like, probably doesn't have the NFL arm strength. I think. He's just always kind of been dismissed because of where he came from and his physical stature. But, man, he was balling out there. And even early on, I dismissed him. People were tagging me like, can Taylor Heinicke be a starter next year? And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I mean, he's been around the league for way too long to all of a sudden be good. And maybe that's still true, but, like, the traits were there. The traits were absolutely there. He was extending plays. He was playing in rhythm, firing balls down the field. Like, he looks like Baker Mayfield with, like, the 6-foot white dude that kind of runs around and then can just step in and fire a rocket. And you're like, wow, I didn't think that guy had that strong of an arm. And he does. He really has a good arm. He's accurate and he's intriguing. Now, there's a long way to go before I say, like, oh, they're good at quarterback next year. But I do think they should bring him back. I mean, very clearly the best quarterback they've had all year is Taylor Heinicke. So, I think Washington brings him back on like maybe a 1-year, $4 million contract, lets him compete. I don't think anyone else is going to give him much more than that, but awesome for Taylor Heinicke. I mean, seriously, for a guy that probably never thought he'd see an NFL field again, unless, he's backing someone up. For a guy to come out and make money in this game, it's just really cool to see. And then I don't know where this goes for Washington. I'm very pessimistic about their outlook. I like a lot of this took a turn for the worse real quick. Like, I don't know, man. Like, their defense is gonna be really good. I know that Ron Rivera is a good coach. I think they're gonna be every year with Ron Rivera as their head coach with this defense with Chase Young and these guys. They're gonna be 8, 9, 10 win team, but they feel like a team that's going to get stuck in purgatory. They really need to do something to figure out the quarterback room. And maybe Taylor Heinicke is just their savior sent from the football gods. It seems unlikely. But until they get a quarterback, and honestly, there's a lot of Scott Turner buzz right now, the offensive coordinator. I don't think he does anything specifically dominant as an offensive play caller. He's fine. But they just don't have anything that elevates the offense. And I feel like they're going to head into next year as one of the 10 worst offenses in football. And that's just, This is very difficult to sustain success when you don't have that figured out. So they're a really fun team. I hate to just like turn that into a negative outlook on the football team. But that's kind of the way I feel about them. Is I'm not all that excited about their future. I think they're a good team, but kind of where are we going here? Like what's the end game? And I don't know kind of where the upside is with this team. Okay, let's get to Sunday's games. Baltimore at Tennessee. All right, Lamar Jackson. You always got to be so careful when you talk about Lamar Jackson, because the Lamar truthers, if you say a single bad word about him, or not even a bad word, if you're critical at all, you're just a hater, and you think he sucks. There's no in between. You either think he's like this top 5 elite quarterback, future Hall of Famer, perennial Super Bowl contender, MVP, all that stuff. You either think he's that, or you are a complete hater. You think he sucks. You think he can't play. You think he can't win a playoff game. It drives me insane, but reality is he's somewhere in between there. That is the truth. And when he wins this game, which was awesome, I picked the Ravens. I won money on this game. This was great. Like, they accomplished, they got over that, they got that monkey off their back. They have now won a playoff game. They can relax, be themselves, and see if they can hang with the Bills here. But let's be real here about what this game meant for Lamar Jackson. Because everyone's freaking out after this game. They're like, oh, Lamar won a playoff game. All the haters said he couldn't win a playoff game. I've been a big Lamar Jackson critique. At what point along the stretch did I ever say Lamar Jackson can't win a playoff game? Like, Blake Bortles went to an AFC championship. Like, if your narrative was really that Lamar Jackson is such a bad quarterback that he cannot win a single playoff game, like, you're an idiot. Like, obviously Lamar Jackson is a talented enough quarterback to beat a Tennessee Titans team that scores 13 points. Like, yeah, we all know that. Lamar Jackson is a good quarterback. But the reality is, as a passer, he is much closer to the other guy in this game, Ryan Tannehill, that couldn't do jack diddly squat, than he is Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers. Much closer to that middling passer. I would say he's probably a worse passer than Ryan Tannehill, but he does enough with his feet to create some big plays. And when you get a defensive performance like this, those 2 or 3 electric plays that he gets with his feet that he's not making with his arm can be enough to win tough games, especially when your defense plays like this. And then everyone's like, oh, but you say you can't come from behind. Okay, they came back from a 10-point deficit in the first quarter, and they gave up 3 points the rest of the game. Like, is that really, like, proving that he can come back and win with his arm? Because he didn't prove that. He did not have a good game with his arm. He made some nice plays. He didn't have a bad game with his arm. But he had 187 yards and a pick, a really bad pick in this game, mind you, that dug them down early. And then he had the amazing runs with his feet. So, like, the thing with Lamar Jackson is people put him on this pedestal of, okay, he's the MVP. They say he's a top 5 quarterback. They say he's an elite quarterback. People say that. A lot of people say that. Okay, you want to put him on that pedestal? You are going to get criticized compared to the other guys on that pedestal. And Lamar Jackson does not play at the level of those guys. It's just true. I mean, if the Ravens defense plays more poorly in this game and they give up 24 points instead of 13, and they don't play one of the most dominant run defensive games against Derrick Henry that we've seen all season, then the narrative shifts. The narrative is, oh, Lamar only ran, he only put up 20 points, and he only threw for 187 yards, and he didn't do enough to win a playoff game. So the narrative is it's just kind of BS. I mean, Lamar Jackson, the reality is, he did nothing in this game that should have changed your opinion on Lamar Jackson. If your opinion was he's so bad that he can't win a playoff game, your opinion was dumb. Like, he is a very good quarterback. He's a smart passer. His pocket decisions, like he can bail from clean pockets. He can, put his head down too early and not keep his eyes downfield. He's not a particularly accurate passer outside the numbers, but like he can make a good quick first read. He can make some nice plays. He can throw outside the pocket. Like he is a good passer, just not a great passer. He's not an elite passer. But if that was your narrative that he is so bad that he can't win a playoff game, like, all right, like you're dumb. But the thing is he a good enough quarterback to pay $40 million that is going to make you a perpetual Super Bowl contender and a quarterback that can go up against the Bills and the Chiefs, who he's going to have to go up against? And my answer to that is he has not proved otherwise. If you just want Lamar Jackson to be considered a good quarterback that needs a lot of help, that needs run blocking, that needs a great defense, that if everything goes right, he could win a Super Bowl, that's fine. But that's not the narrative with Lamar Jackson. The thing with Lamar is he's an MVP. He is an elite player. He is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And he hasn't proved that. So let's get off of Lamar Jackson here, but that's just kind of where I'm at with Lamar Jackson. He's somewhere in that 7 to 14 range as a quarterback. Hard to tell how much the running really elevates that. But yeah, let's get off that. The Ravens defense was incredible in this game. They got back to Ravens football, which is defense, running the ball, and they made the Titans extremely uncomfortable. Now, we just bashed on Lamar. Let's bash on the Titans, because Titans fans, I like you guys, but this is kind of what I've been warning you all year, and the same thing goes with the Titans, is if you want to say you're a top 5 team, if you want to be considered a Super Bowl contender, and you want me to talk about you in that light, you need to expect to be able to be picked apart and criticized as such. And I've been saying about the Titans that they are a very boom or bust offense. And the response to that was always, what do you mean we're a boom or bust offense? We're a top 3 offense in the league. Yeah, statistically, they put up huge numbers. They have huge games on offense. When things are right for this Titans team, it is as good as anyone in the league. But there's stinkers in there. The one game against the Colts, the Packers game, this game, and those stinkers come when they can force you to get to third down, force Ryan Tannehill to beat you and make decisions, and take away Derrick Henry. And the Ravens did that. They loaded the box. They ran eight-man fronts all game, and the Titans kept running the ball into a brick wall. Credit the Ravens for getting off blocks, setting the edge, tackling Derrick Henry in space. And Titans didn't have an answer because Ryan Tannehill is a decent quarterback. He's a Kirk Cousins. He's a Jared Goff. He's fine. He plays in a system that perfectly caters to him, but when you force him to get to third down, when you force him to beat you, more often than not, it's just not going to happen. That's exactly what we saw in this game. And the Titans defense actually stepped up and played pretty well in this game. The Titans defense has struggled all season long. But the last thing I'll say here is Arthur Smith is going to be hired somewhere else. Corey Davis is probably gone. And the Titans have a rough road ahead. And I'm worried that this was their peak with this team. And from what I saw from Mike Vrabel, his defense all year was one of the worst in the league. He punted on 4th and 2 late in this game, like at midfield. Terrible, one of the worst punt decisions of the year. And I think he's a good coach. I think Arthur Smith is a great coach. And it makes me think of the letting Shanahan go and keeping Dan Quinn. It does make me think of that. The way the Titans' future outlook looks, I'm very pessimistic about the future of the Tennessee Titans. There's some things they could do to fix this. Like they could maybe bring Corey Davis back. Arthur Smith is gone, but maybe they have someone in place. It's not over here in Tennessee, but it was not a great look for the Titans. For a team that was supposed to be so good on offense, they got dominated, and they're losing their offensive coordinator and their, number 1, number 2 receiver, whatever you want to call Corey Davis. He's going to get $17, $18 million this offseason. All right, Chicago at New Orleans. This game was just not very fun to watch. I'm going to get through it a little quicker. This game was on Nickelodeon. I thought that was really cool. I tuned in and just I have a lot of respect for Nate Burleson and was Zach Eagle, Ian Eagle's son. And I couldn't call a game like that, targeting 7 to 12-year-old children, trying to explain the game, making jokes about Drake and Josh and SpongeBob and all these. I was a Nickelodeon kid growing up, but it's just I'm impressed by Nate Burleson, especially his ability to cater to such different demographics as an entertainer. I have a lot of respect for Burleson and really the entire Good Morning Football staff. I enjoy those people. I think they have a great cast for that show, but Burleson is one of them. But I liked how they were trying to introduce a new generation of fans into the NFL. And, EA Sports was probably just, drooling, going like this, like, yes, a new generation of 13-year-olds who can spend their money on Madden Ultimate Team. Let's go. So happy about it. That was another thought I had in that game. The Bears are who we thought they were, right? Terrible on offense. They tried their absolute asses off on defense. Only so much they could do. If Javon Wims, if he doesn't drop that touchdown on the trick play that Trubisky actually dropped a dime on, Bears were going to be right in this game. But they didn't execute, and I was a little surprised they didn't go to Nick Foles. Not because Nick Foles is better than Mitch Trubisky, but I feel like so often you see teams just, when things are going as bad as they were offensively for the Bears, just try something different, see if it works. I was a little surprised, especially given Foles' kind of playoff magic success. I thought that was a missed opportunity to at least try and see if Nick Foles, because Trubisky running out of the bounds on fourth down, and he got worse as the game got on for sure. And I just felt like kind of in that third quarter mark when it was a 2-score game, I was surprised they didn't go to Foles just to try and spark something. I thought that was a lost opportunity for Nagy and these guys. But they're going to run this thing back. They're going to try a new quarterback next year. I don't think Trubisky will be on this roster. Foles, I think, is under contract. He'll probably be the backup. Maybe it's Mac Jones. Maybe it's Andy Dalton, Cam Newton, Jacoby Brissett, something like that. That's probably their direction here, unless, again, they draft God forbid they draft Kyle Trask, who's literally just Nick Foles. That would be the most meaningless draft pick ever, but I wouldn't rule that out for the Bears. The Bears just weren't a playoff team. They just weren't. Their offense is not good enough. And then for the Saints, defense played super well. Their front seven is awesome. They dominated the run in this game. And offensively, they continued to sort of somehow make this work. It feels like every time they produce on offense, it's kind of like, how did that work? It's like it's dropping it off to Lil Jordan Humphrey when Drew Brees can barely see over his left tackle, and he's just dropping a floater, and they're somehow making 3 guys miss and getting a tough first down. They have to fight so hard for everything on offense. It feels like they're just playing with fire, but they execute. They get it done. They make guys miss. They don't make a ton of mistakes. They block super well up front. They come up with creative play calls to steal yardage, if you will. And when your defense plays like this, it can be enough to win a playoff game, and we'll see if they can go on a run here. But I just don't think we learned anything from these teams, and I don't have a whole lot of takeaways. The game was not really close. Cleveland at Pittsburgh is our final game here, and you could either spend like 50 minutes talking about this game or talk about it for 2 minutes, because it was so wild. But it's hard to explain a lot of the things that happen. You got the Browns coaching staff is out for the most part. Like Stefanski's not in there. You got Alex Van Pelt calling plays, the quarterback coach. Offensive line coach is out in a week where your left guard is out with COVID. Your right tackle leaves in the first quarter with an injury, and all of a sudden you're playing guys that you picked up off the scrap heap this week. I don't even remember their names, the guy that stepped in at right tackle and left guard, but they played great. I mean, I know the left guard graded out super well per PFF. The run game was awesome. And the right tackle pretty much took out TJ Watt. So you can't argue with that. This team has plugged in different linemen throughout the year, and they've done a great job to find these guys. But my biggest takeaway from this game, especially for Cleveland, was Baker was awesome. I mean, he had every excuse in the world to come out and not have a good week, to panic and not trust his offensive line. There's no Odell Beckham. Really, all he has is Jarvis Landry in the passing game. He had all the excuses in the world to press and try to do too much. And I know that he got a lot of help by getting up early, and the run game was great, but he had almost 300 yards in this game. He was making some really tough plays. I thought the 2-minute drive before half was huge because you could feel that momentum coming back. And Baker, his game awareness and that it factor and game feel, he knew the gravity of that drive right there, in that if he goes 3 and out, maybe the Steelers get a quick field goal, and all of a sudden it's just a two-score game at half, a 10-point game or whatever. He understood, we have an opportunity here to kind of put this game away and make this too much of a comeback for the Steelers, and he totally did. And he didn't press. The Steelers wanted nothing more than Baker Mayfield in his first playoff start to not settle for those checkdowns, to not scramble on third down when he needed to force things downfield. And it was a methodical drive. It was nothing overly impressive that he did, physically speaking. It wasn't Patrick Mahomes dancing around and firing a 25-yard strike, but he took what he needed and he marched down the field and came up with a huge touchdown in that drive. And then he made enough plays in the second half to kill the clock and create some third downs. And I was just overall really impressed by Baker. He looked, the moment was not too big for him. People say that a lot, but it was very real for Baker Mayfield in this game. And he wasn't 48 points good as a quarterback, but he was very good as a quarterback. He looked like a top 10 quarterback. I have really been on board the Baker train. I thought that Ravens game was big for him to sort of come out as this franchise great quarterback. And games like this are what's going to get him there. And we're going to do our previews here in just a minute, but I am stoked to see him against Patrick Mahomes. And then for the Steelers, I mean, this was really not a surprising game. I did think that the game the Steelers had, I thought that was going to be the Browns, where their coach is out, they have all the excuses, first playoff game, jittery to start. But it was the Steelers that looked like they had never played in a playoff game before. The opening snap goes over Big Ben's head, and the Browns scoop it up for a touchdown. It was the most Cleveland Browns start ever for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben throws 4 interceptions in this game. First half, he looked like he couldn't play. Second half, he comes out and looks like his old self. Very polarizing game for Big Ben. He had 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And the defense crumbled. The defense absolutely crumbled. This is another reason why you're so hesitant with defensive-minded teams, which is what the Steelers were. It's what the Bears are here. It's in a lot of ways it's what the Ravens are. Here we are again. The Bears get bounced this week. Washington gets bounced this week. The Steelers here get bounced. Teams that were very defense-first teams. And we say it every year, and it just holds up time and time again. Browns, much more offensive-oriented here. Steelers are just going to kind of be back next year. I do think Big Ben returns. I don't think he's going to retire. But I don't see their season going a whole lot differently. I think getting crowd noise will feed into some of these defensive-minded teams a lot better. But overall, just another disappointing exit for Pittsburgh. They're good enough to keep Mike Tomlin, but they disappoint enough where it's is this ever going to elevate? And they need to find a long-term answer at quarterback. And Mike Tomlin's a great coach, but he doesn't do schematically anything special to elevate this team. So I don't know. I had the Steelers going 11-5 and having a decent season, and it's basically what happened. All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to preview the 4 games for the upcoming weekend, make our picks, and then we're going to get into the mailbag. So we've got 4 awesome divisional round games this weekend. 8 teams that deserve to be here. These are really good football teams. This isn't like years past where you get a big upset week 1 and you don't think it's a team that belongs. No, I think all 8 of these teams deserve to be here and do one thing really well. All of these teams have a true strength. So let's get into it. We're going to go in order. We're going to start with the Rams, Packers. And a lot of this I have previewed already because my playoff predictions went 5 for 6. The NFC are the 2 matchups that I expected, so I don't have a ton to add here. And if you want more depth, go back to my predictions video. But my predictions for this game have not changed. I do think the Packers win. I think the Packers match up with the Rams much better than the Seahawks do. I think that the Packers, just from a run game perspective versus the Seahawks, the Packers are an outside zone team, right? They're going to be able to run away from Aaron Donald. And you look at like the Niners, for example, which this team is Niners East in Green Bay, schematically. The Niners actually have success against the Rams because they can neutralize Aaron Donald with moving pockets and basically running away from him. Whereas the Seahawks, they're running Chris Carson up the middle a bunch. Like they're not going to be able to avoid Aaron Donald there. So I do think the Rams as a running game, and you can kind of, if you are running outside zone, look at the Rams edge players. Leonard Floyd, terrible against the run. Agbanya Okoronkwo is 235 pounds. Samson Ebukam is not a great run defender. That's how you attack the Rams, is you get to the perimeter. And stylistically, offensively, the Packers compared to the Seahawks are more than comfortable, like, taking what you give them, which is what the Rams do. They want... The more I talk about this, the worse of a matchup I think it is for the Rams, because the Rams, in an ideal situation, they are going to force you to have a 14-play drive where your quarterback doesn't make a mistake and hope that at some point in there, Aaron Donald splits a double team and ruins a drive. Well, the Packers are, I think, almost inarguably the most methodical offense in the league. Packers are more than comfortable, 13-play drive. You know, Aaron Rodgers has an average depth of target of 5. And they just march down. Aaron Rodgers, mistake-free football. They mix in some good runs. They're more than comfortable doing that. More than any team in the league. And the Rams, I think, compared to the Seahawks, where they're like, we're either going 3 and out or Russell Wilson hits DK Metcalf for 70 yards. It's completely different stylistically. I think the Rams defense, especially if Aaron Donald is banged up in this one, is going to struggle a lot more. And then inversely, I do think the Rams have some success. The Packers have really proved to be a better run defense this year. I will never trust a Packers defense in the playoffs, so I do expect the Rams to have some success, but I don't think that they'll bully the Packers defense. I do think that this is a scheme that this defense is obviously familiar going against. They do play the Vikings twice a year. They just played the Titans and played really good against a similar team several weeks ago. They dominated the Niners this year. I think that the Green Bay defense has gotten very comfortable against this style of offense, whereas the Rams defense, I think, maybe not so much catered to play this style of offense. So I do think the Packers win. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you got Aaron Rodgers against Jared Goff with a broken thumb as well. So this is, I think, probably the most lopsided game, but I don't think it's a blowout. I think my score prediction was 26-21. Vegas has the Rams as a 7-point underdog in this game, so I'm kind of in line with Vegas. I don't expect any surprises in this one. That said, we've all witnessed some of the most pathetic defensive performances against run-heavy teams by this Packers defense, and if it happens again and they give up 300 yards, am I going to act surprised? No. I'm really not. There's no reason for that to happen, but this Packers defense perpetually fails this team, so I don't know, man. There's no reason the Packers should lose this game. I think from a matchup perspective, Green Bay has the nod, and I'll stick with my 26-21 score prediction. Now, in the AFC, we got some different matchups here. So does this change now my predictions? Let's get into it. Baltimore at Buffalo. I do find this fascinating. I think that Baltimore is much more equipped to beat the Bills than they are the Chiefs for a couple reasons. The Bills beg you to run the ball, whereas the Chiefs are much more stout against the run. The Bills kind of play that style that the Rams play, which is back off, cover 4, and kind of dare you to run the ball. And they're not going to be able to do that against the Ravens. The Ravens will gladly face 6-7 man fronts and take 7 yards carry all day. So the Bills are going to have to play out of their comfort zone defensively. And the Ravens defense is playing really well right now. They have the corners to match up with these receivers for Buffalo. So that's a good matchup. Like this should be a slugfest. And you got two quarterbacks that are in a lot of ways unproven in the playoffs. You're worried about Lamar and his passing. We'll not go back into that. We've done that earlier in the show. And I still have not worries, but sure, worries. Like I'm still not fully convinced that Josh Allen doesn't have that game where he has 3 or 4 really stupid throws. And against a Ravens defense that is super aggressive and just feeds off of turnovers, I'm not going to predict that it will happen. I am going to take the Bills to win this game, but I think it's in there. I do think it's in there, a game where the Ravens pass rush dominates up front and Josh Allen starts, chucking stupid throws up, and all of a sudden the Ravens find themselves with a lead against a team that doesn't play great run defense, and the Ravens can win this game. Now, if the Ravens defense gets on their heels and Josh Allen starts lighting up the scoreboard, which we know he's more than capable of, I think that's the likely outcome, is nothing slows down the Bills in this game, and they come out and put up 30 points. I don't trust Lamar to keep up in a passing shootout. So I do think it's a really good game. I don't know what the spread is off the top of my head. I think it's only 2 points. I think it's actually pretty close. I could be wrong about that. And I think that's pretty accurate. I'm going to go Bills 28, Ravens 24. But this is going to be such a fun game. This is not a game I'm betting. I think there's some really fascinating things. I think the Ravens are your typical chip-on-your-shoulder team. And I think that they match up pretty well against this Bills team. I'm not going to lie. So that's going to be a really fun one. I am going to take the Bills, but I'm very hesitant about it. I don't feel quite as confident in that one. Then we got Cleveland at Kansas City. And I have this theory, which I don't even think you can call a theory at this point because I think it's so evident and so proven, that teams that rest their starters are doing themselves a disservice. And I've even said, especially if you have a first-round bye like the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs were not playing great football before they rested their starters. Case in point, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I didn't even talk about that with the Steelers. They rested their starters week 17, and they come out super flat the next week. I just think it's a bad cultural mentality shift of, coasting. We're too good. We don't need to play. We'll be able to just pick up and play. I don't think football is like that. And you have the Browns coming in here with nothing to lose, a badass quarterback in Baker Mayfield, a dominant offensive line that is going to come out, and that first snap for this Kansas City Chiefs defense, it could be if Nick Chubb comes out and I'm just going to call my shot right now. Again, not predicting that it will happen, but if it happens, would not be surprised. First play of the game, Nick Chubb, 75-yard touchdown. And the Chiefs are like, oh, God, whoa. Because this Browns offensive line is going to be healthy. I think they'll have, I don't know what Conklin's situation is, but they should have Bitonio back from COVID this week. Stefanski's back. This team's going to come out and be like, we shouldn't be here. We shouldn't be here. We weren't supposed to beat the Steelers. We didn't have our coach last week. We got nothing to lose. Let's come out. And the Chiefs defense that's kind of squishy, kind of soft. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns get up early, punch the Chiefs in the mouth, and force the Chiefs to do what they've done really for a long time now, and that is respond, get Patrick Mahomes to do his magic, and that is what I think happens. I think that they get going. The Browns defense is a problem. Barring this pass rush, really going off and Myles Garrett having a 12 pressure game, which could happen against Eric Fisher. I don't think the Browns have the firepower to ultimately keep up with the Chiefs. But the 10-point spread in this game, I think, is ridiculous. I really do think that the Browns get up early. I'm going to be taking the Browns first quarter line for sure in this game. But ultimately, I do think that the Chiefs are more than comfortable playing from behind, but they are playing with fire a little bit. So I'm going to take the Chiefs 35-31 in this game. And then we got Tampa Bay at New Orleans. And this is round 3. I hinted at this earlier. I think Tampa Bay is playing significantly better football now than they have in years past. I think the best game the Bucs has to offer is a much better game than the Saints have to offer. The Saints have this incredibly, like their floor with their depth and experience and Drew Brees and Sean Payton, their floor, like their worst day, if you took every team's worst day of these 8 teams, the Saints' worst day is better than any of them. But you can make a case that their best day is, the Vikings game being an outlier there because the Vikings defense was so bad. But the Saints' best day is probably not as good as any of these teams. And I'm worried that Tampa Bay is going to have their best day in this game. And I think that the Tampa Bay's best game is better than anybody left here. So that's really what this comes down to is what do you get from the Bucs? Because I kind of know what I'm getting from the Saints. You're getting a really good defensive play. You're getting good D-line play. You're getting a good secondary that will get beat, but is going to make some plays as well. A good linebacking core that tackles well. They're not going to give up a whole lot on the ground. And then offensively, you're getting methodical, mistake-free offense. Probably a decent amount of punts in this game. Not a lot of explosive plays, but frustrating third down conversions where you think you're getting off the field and some random receiver makes a guy miss and turns it into a first down, or, Taysom Hill comes in and does some random stuff that you weren't expecting. But you kind of know what you're getting from New Orleans. Tampa Bay, I like what I've seen. I don't necessarily know what I'm getting from them. If they play like they have the last 3 weeks, though, I'm going to take the Bucs to win this game, and I'm going to predict that we do get the Bucs team from the last 3 weeks. I'm going to take the Bucs 28-24 in this game. I just don't think that the Saints have the firepower to keep down the Bucs the way they're playing right now. So we're going Packers. We're going Bills, but I'm scared. I'm scared for the Bills. I think they much would have rather played Cleveland. Kansas City and Tampa Bay here, which is my Final Four. My Final Four predictions are still alive. And there's your previews for this upcoming weekend. All right, let's get into the mailbag. We have a ton of questions here. Again, guys, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can submit your questions to the show. And we're getting so many of these questions at this point. I'm going to still try to get through all of these, at least for this show. It might be getting to the point where I need to pre-read them and only set aside a select few for each show because you guys' support has been so incredible. But there's only so much I can do when I have like 40 questions here. But we're going to do it for this show because I love you guys and I appreciate your support. Moving forward, though, if you do not start with mailbag questions, and I'll do a post on this on Patreon, if you don't start with quote-unquote mailbag question, or however you need to phrase it, I'm going to gloss over your message and assume that it is a question personally for me or a comment, not a mailbag question. All right. So our first question here from Northwest Seahawks fan. Really enjoy your content. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Does the recent resurgence of the Cowboys and Andy Dalton's good performance in recent games lower Dak's value? Does it suggest that he is nowhere near as important as some have hyped him up to be? What should the Seahawks do in the offseason at quarterback? So a lot of you guys know my opinion on Dak is that he is a little bit overhyped, if not a little bit, definitely overhyped. I do think he's a good quarterback. I think he's about Kirk Cousins. Probably better than Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, maybe a little better than those guys. Like, he is a starting caliber quarterback. He is a quote-unquote good quarterback. I have some criticisms about him. I won't go too far deep into it. But the other thing is that he has the easiest job outside of Kansas City at the quarterback position. A lot of his production comes when they're way far down. It's garbage time. When he goes against some of the better defenses in some of those big-time games, I have some questions about his pocket movement, his downfield, not necessarily accuracy, but just decisions. Very much a one read, and if it's not wide open, he'll just kind of put it up for his receivers to make a play. And I did think that in the games where Andy Dalton did trust his receivers to kind of, put the ball in their hands and just kind of push the ball downfield and be aggressive with it, just like Dak is, you saw virtually the same quarterback a lot of the time. The thing is, Dak does it very consistently. He is a much more what you call a confident processor in that he kind of sees the field a lot better than Andy Dalton does. So I do think, Dak is simply put a better, more confident quarterback than Andy Dalton. I don't think that in reality that lowered Dak's value, because I do think Dak is perceived as, by the league, at worst, Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins is one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league because he played the market well, which is what Dak is doing. So I don't think that Dalton played well enough to lower Dak's value, because there was a lot of bad in there for Andy Dalton as well. I actually thought he would be a little better than he ended up being. But the offensive line also completely fell apart, mind you. But I do think that the Cowboys bring Dak back. I think they franchise tag him, to be completely honest, again, because he was on the tag this year. And then basically have him play a prove-it season. And I wouldn't be surprised if they spent, I don't know this quarterback class deep enough, well enough, but if there's a guy like, say, a Jalen Hurts from last year, or, someone with some upside, maybe it's Jamie Newman, maybe it's, Mac Jones starts to fall, or something like that. I don't know the exact name now, but I wouldn't be stunned if this team spent a day 2 pick on a quarterback to kind of put something in place there in case they do go somewhere else than Dak. But I do think he's back, and that his true value has not changed all that much. I mean, if he hit the market, he would get the Deshaun Watson deal, because quarterbacks like Dak just don't hit the market. All right, from Jonah, with the breakout of Roquan Smith, do you think this changes how we view young linebackers? Roquan was viewed as an elite prospect and a day 1 impact, but he struggled in the first few years of his career. I do think that has totally become a real thing. I think Roquan, Devin White, and this year the LSU linebacker, what's his name? Queen. Patrick Queen. All 3 of those guys, very boom or bust early in their career within games. Like, they'll make some splash plays, but struggle to take on blocks or play with some of that discipline, the coverage instincts. Like, I think linebacker and corner are the hardest positions outside of quarterback, and you can even argue harder with the way the game is structured these days, to come in and play year 1. So yeah, I do think you get these athletic dudes at linebacker coming from the college game that's a lot different. I do think we need to give these guys some more time, for sure. So yeah, I agree with you there. All right, from Matthew Morin, this is another Andy Dalton Dak take. What do you think? Basically, every analyst sees in Dak that you don't. Nate Tice put him in the top 5 over the next 5 years. Obviously, I think the Cowboys should look to upgrade, but I think a team shouldn't stop looking until they have a top 3 guy. Teams should never look to downgrade like you suggested with Dalton. That's fair. I just traits-wise, I think that Dak doesn't manipulate pressure particularly well. I think the Seahawks game is a great example. 3-man rush, and technically his left tackle got beat. His left tackle gets pushed into him. But the way that he steps into the sack, whereas virtually every quarterback that you want in that situation is going to either drift or roll out or elude the pressure. He's very locked in downfield. He gets his, he's got his first read. He goes through his progressions. He's not a first read player. But and I may have said that earlier and kind of misspoke on that, but he is very much 7-step drops, quick progressions. If he doesn't see it far too often for me, he's just putting it up. 50-50 ball. Confident processor. It works when you have a phenomenal receiving core, but you also see some of those risky plays that turn into interceptions. That's my biggest criticism of him. I don't really knock his like downfield accuracy or any of that stuff. I think he's done a good job to develop in that part of his game. I don't think Dak's a bad quarterback. You'll never hear me saying that. I just don't know if you can win with Dak Prescott getting paid $40 million because I see him in that Cousins Goff range where like everything needs to be perfect there. But I think, I didn't say they should move on from him and keep Dalton. I said if Dalton can show that he plays like he did in that Week 16 game, that they should. And Dalton didn't show that. When I said that, I was like, if Dalton shows up Week 17, goes off against the Giants, which he didn't, and goes into the playoffs and plays well, then it's something you think about. Well, Dalton just hasn't been good enough for that take to play out. All right, from JOR. You've occasionally mentioned some teams looking for a quarterback might look to trade for Jordan Love. What do you think it would take for Green Bay to trade Love away, considering they traded up in the first to get him? So I do think it's something teams out there will think about. I think that the quarterback market is much different now than it was a year ago. A lot of the middling teams that are looking for quarterbacks now really weren't last year. Colts, Niners, potentially. I think the Panthers were very happy that they just signed Teddy Bridgewater, but they're in that next stage where they're looking for a quarterback. Washington still had their eggs in the Dwayne Haskins basket. The Denver Broncos had their eggs in the Drew Lock basket. A lot of these middling teams that would have been thinking about Jordan Love last year, or should have been thinking about Jordan Love last year, in my opinion, are now thinking about quarterbacks. And if those top four guys are gone, I don't see a much better prospect with elite upside to go after. And from the Packers' perspective, they didn't think Aaron Rodgers was going to come out and be an MVP this year, very clearly. Aaron Rodgers has said he wants to play till he's 40. If they really thought that Aaron Rodgers still had this season in them, they never draft Jordan Love last year. And I think they are very happy that they have Jordan Love. He has the dream development track that you look for a quarterback like him, who is more of a boomer bust prospect. When I go back and look at my pre-draft evaluation, Jordan Love would have been my quarterback 3 in this class. I would have gone Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Jordan Love 3, Fields, and Trey Lance. Now, Fields reminds me a lot of Jordan Love, by the way. Fields, Love, and Lance are boom or bust prospects where they need to develop. You don't want to put too much on them early, but they have all the athletic traits to thrive at the next level. And from the Packers' perspective, if Aaron Rodgers is playing like this, which is a sustainable play style as he ages, because he's not doing all these crazy plays that he used to. He's got it in there now and again, but he's playing in rhythm, he's playing in structure, he's playing kind of stylistically different than he ever has, and he's so on the same page with Matt LaFleur. They have a dream connection. Well, if he plays like this for the next 4 years, like he says he wants to, well, you're sitting on Jordan Love for a long time. That is a long time to keep Jordan Love in the kitchen. And they're not going to just get rid of him to get rid of him. But if they get an offer from the Carolina Panthers at 8, or say the Denver Broncos offer, I don't know, what would be a deal, like KJ Hamler and their first round pick, or something that was like too much for them to say, yeah, that's a bad deal for it. Like, I think they would do it if a team actually liked Jordan Love and they see him as the best option. I don't think the Packers would do it if they're just getting their pick from last year back. Like if the Colts, who I think picked like 23, if the Colts gave them their first for Jordan Love, I don't think they would do that. I think they want to be able to get an elite difference-making player. And if someone offered that for Jordan Love, I think they would do it. Now, I would do that. If I'm the Panthers at 8 and the other quarterbacks are all gone and I didn't get Darnold or Wentz, I would do it because I think that risk for a potentially elite quarterback that just sat for a year in the NFL behind Aaron Rodgers, I think that gamble is worth it. But that's because I personally was really high on Jordan Love. I thought the Chargers should have drafted Jordan Love at 6. I thought the Dolphins screwed up taking Tua and not Jordan Love. So I was really high on Jordan Love. Other people were too, but it just depends on what other teams felt about him and how much they value that time in the kitchen in Green Bay. But I think that's what you're talking about, is getting a top 12 pick for Jordan Love, not, back into the first round and just kind of recuperating your pick from last year, because I think they're very excited about Jordan Love, and I think they're really happy that they were able to redshirt him for the whole season, and he didn't have to play. He just sat and learned. All right, from Josh Ahlstrom, can you do a Jamar Chase versus Devontae Smith film breakdown? Yes, I will be doing those players on Patreon, probably sometime in February, March. From Aiden, who's your coach of the year? I'll give it to Kevin Stefanski. Love the job he did this year. The Browns finally got their coach. I think when the Browns made the playoffs and the Dolphins didn't, that made my decision for them. But both Flores and Stefanski, great jobs. All right, from Ash Bromfeld. Is there any chance doing a podcast segment covering teams and potential GM candidates over the next couple of weeks? People ask me about this, and I shy away from this because, honestly, I would be guessing just like you guys. Like, I don't really know. I don't know these guys personally. I wish I had connections with all these guys around the league, but there's some guys that I've been impressed by, but I don't know like what these guys, what they want to do with their career and how they're perceived around the league and how much is them versus the guy like a guy like George Patton in Minnesota, for example. I have a lot of respect for him, and he's getting interviewed for the Lions, and that seems like a great fit, but I don't know how much is him versus Rick Spielman making these decisions. So like I just don't feel like I am the most qualified person to answer those questions, which isn't the answer I would want to give you, but I'm going to be honest. Like that's not my area of expertise, is internal staff and who the best options would be. I think there's guys like a Daniel Jeremiah would probably be, or Bucky Brooks would probably know a lot more about that, or even like McShay and Kuiper. Like they probably are much more connected there than I am to have a good answer for you there. Personally, from Nicholas Craig, where do you think Sam Darnold would be the most successful at with potential trading candidates? I love the idea of Sam Darnold with the San Francisco 49ers. Kyle Shanahan could absolutely save Sam Darnold for pretty obvious reasons. So I love that fit. Second round pick should do it. I would love that fit. I would probably grab a Sam Darnold 49ers jersey, even though I have a magical power to curse players, so maybe I shouldn't. From Jake Godian, I know it's a meaningless game with not much to take away, but do you feel guys like Darwin Thompson and Byron Pringle played given the opportunity? I'm going to be completely honest. I was very busy week 17. I did not catch the Chiefs backups versus Justin Herbert quite yet. So I'm sorry. The week 17 was the first week where I did not watch every game. Hopefully at some point I get to that game, especially when I kind of round up my opinion on Justin Herbert heading into next year, because I know he played pretty well in that game. But unfortunately, I'm going to be honest again. I did not watch the Chiefs backups against the Chargers week 17. I just had other time pressing matters there. From Avery Wagner, but I do like those players. I will say I do like Darwin Thompson and Byron Pringle as depth pieces. From Avery Wagner, what would you do if you were Joe Douglas, who is the Jets general manager? Trade Darnold for a second-round pick and draft Zach Wilson, draft Penei Sewell, second overall, or trade the second overall pick, collect assets, and build around Darnold? Well, I think I answered that in my what I would do mock draft since then. This question was before that, so go check out my mock draft from last week if you have not already, Avery. From Jimmy Smith, not the Ravens corner. Reports over the weekend stated that the Lions would make a run at Seattle's GM. Am I wrong for not being a fan of this? It probably won't happen anyways, but I'm not a fan of Seattle's roster. I am a big John Schneider apologist. He went to the same college I did, Division III, University of St. Thomas, St. Paul, and I agree that the Seahawks have been a really rough front office over the last 4 or 5 years. But personally, I think Pete Carroll is running the show there, as is kind of evidenced by Schneider wanting out. Like, I think, or at least considering leaving, because I think Schneider is a really good scout. I think he's proven to be a good scout. But I think you're getting some interference from Pete Carroll getting the final say there, and that relationship is becoming damaging to the state of the roster. So I'm a John Schneider apologist. This is an area where I am biased because I have kind of a connection to him on an emotional level, and I'm rooting for him. I think it'd be a great move for Detroit. I think the guys that they're interviewing between Schneider and Patton, I think they're great candidates. I think either of them would be a great hire for Detroit. But there is some iffiness there with Schneider because they have not been a particularly good front office for the last few years. But I don't think it's all his fault. From Davis Jed, what team hiring / coach do you see being first? I think the Jags and Urban Meyer is going to happen before a lot of these other guys because most of these candidates are in the playoffs right now. Urban Meyer is not. Which, when that happens, I'll talk about Urban Meyer to the Jags, unless one of these mailbag questions has it. From Chris Hain, what changed your opinion that the Dolphins should be considering taking a quarterback at 3? Pretty simple answer. My opinion on Tua has not changed, but after watching these quarterbacks, my eval on Fields was that he is not a good enough quarterback prospect to give up on Tua. And same thing with Trey Lance. Their upsides are clearly higher, but their team, those are quarterbacks that they need the help. And if you take a quarterback at 3, they're not having the help in Miami. So to me, it's kind of a waste. I don't think Fields or Lance are upgrades to Tua. I actually had a higher grade on Tua coming out than I did on Fields and Lance, believe it or not, considering I wasn't a very big Tua guy. But that's what changed, is I ended up being lower on Fields and Lance than I was on Tua coming out. From Gus, do you think Cam Newton is back as a starter next year with the Pats, or do they let him walk? I'm 50-50 on that. I think Pats are in a tough spot. I think it might make some sense to bring Cam back if you give him some more weapons. I think rejuvenized defense, crowd noise, better weapons on offense. I think they could be a 10-win team with Cam Newton. It's not that he was so bad, but he just isn't great. Dare I say he's not even good, but he's a starting caliber quarterback. He's somewhere in the 26 to 29 range, which I don't know if they're going to find an upgrade on the open market. From Funny Face Bro, now that Nick Caserio is the Texans GM, do you think he'll use some of those old Belichick techniques and move on from older players past that prime, such as J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless? Yeah, I could see that, especially Whitney Merciless. I talked about J.J. Watt, I think last episode, that I don't think they should do that, but wouldn't stun me. But yeah, that's a good take. If that's the thought process there. From Jack Brown, who would you consider to be a blue chip prospect so far from the 2021 process? Full disclaimer here. I haven't even gotten to the defensive side of the ball. I haven't done offensive line. I haven't done the tight ends. Blue chip prospects. I think you can probably say Trevor Lawrence is a blue chip prospect. I don't think I've made a quarterback a blue chip. That's tough. I've never said a quarterback is a blue chip prospect because I have a very, very high standard for blue chip, probably more than anyone. Some people say a true first-round prospect is a blue chip prospect. To me, it's like this guy is not going to bust. He is a day one all-pro caliber player and a likely Hall of Famer is my blue chip qualifier. I don't know if any quarterback is a likely Hall of Famer who is bust-proof, even Trevor Lawrence, but he's pretty damn close. I don't think any other running backs are. I wouldn't say Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase are. I think Chase has some questions after sitting out for a year. I think he's a great prospect. I think he's a top 5 prospect. I don't know if I would put the blue chip tag on him. Penei Sewell, I think, has a good chance of it when I evaluate him. Defensively, I don't see anyone having that tag. Maybe Micah Parsons would be the third there. I would say Parsons and Penei Sewell might be the only two in this class that I give a true blue chip tag to based on my standards. Logan Meyer asks, this hurts coming from a Longhorn fan, but do you think Urban Meyer, what do I think of the Urban Meyer to the Jags rumors? Well, there you go. Someone asked. I'm not a fan of it. It's kind of a bleh thing for me. I'm so heavy on, like, I want a coach that brings me schematics and elevates players. And, Meyer's a great recruiter. He's a culture guy. He could be Jim Harbaugh. He could be Mike Tomlin. But what does he really bring to the table? I don't know. I would want more upside with Trevor Lawrence. I would want Brian Dable, Arthur Smith. Devontae Rivera asks, in the 10 overtime games, I see where this is going. In the 10 overtime games this season, the team that started with the ball won 5 times, and only one of those was decided by the opening drive. Yeah, I think it's an outlier season. You guys know how I feel about overtime rules. I'm not gonna change my opinion because some games this year have gone that way. 5 of the last 6 playoff overtime games, the coin toss winner won the toss and won the game on the opening drive. That's enough for me. Playoff games decided while Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers twice, Patrick Mahomes, MVP Matt Ryan sat from the sideline and watched their tired-ass defense in high-scoring games give up opening drive touchdowns. I don't really care what happens when Gardner Minshew and Nick Foles go to overtime. That's not what you're trying to prevent. You're trying to prevent elite quarterbacks having to sit and watch because of stupid rules. That's my stance on NFL overtime rules. I don't really care what the regular season results were. Justin Oakes. So since Doug and Howie will both be staying for the Eagles, well, this is kind of outdated, so I'm going to move past that one. Doug has been fired, and we talked about that earlier. Matthew Bell, with the Panthers picking at 8, they certainly will have to trade up for a quarterback. I think there's a chance they could get Trey Lance if they like him at 8, but they might have to trade up. Do you think the Dolphins or Bengals will be willing to trade down? I do think the Dolphins. I could see either of those teams trading down. Yeah, I think the Dolphins, if a team wants to get quarterback value at 3, absolutely. And then you have a Urban Meyer question. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. I think the Panthers are our team that wants to get a quarterback this offseason, and Dolphins or Bengals would be a trade-down candidate there. From Costa, just signed up to Patreon, so I hope this actually works. Well, we got you, Costa. I follow the Texans closely. They're my favorite team. I have mixed thoughts about the Caserio hiring. On one side, I see a scenario where Caserio is his own figure, like Brian Flores and Joe Judge, and structures contracts in a team-friendly way. On the other hand, Caserio and Jack Easterby were known to be close friends, and New England share the same agent in Bob Lamonte. So this could also be the continuation of Easterby's magic plan to turn the Texans into the reincarnation of the Patriots, despite the fact that he has no actual football experience whatsoever. So, Marcus, how do you view the much maligned Jack Easterby past future role at the Texans organization decision-making? Do you think Caserio will bring forward his own ideas? I understand your concern here as a Texans fan because they have run that organization into the ground to the point that your elite franchise quarterback wants out. Unfortunately, I have no idea what Caserio's plans are going to be. Your guess is as good as mine. I can only assume that he will take many of the New England philosophies with him. But he's not going to have that Bill Belichick instinct of the coach. So, of the coach and knowing kind of what roles each guy's going to play as a scout, coach, GM combo. I don't have a great answer for you, honestly. Like, your guess is as good as mine. I can only assume that he'll have New England philosophies and that the Texans have not proven anything against that they're going to screw this up. But unfortunately, your guess is as good as mine on how he's going to work out. I'm excited to see it. From Oscar Garcia, Happy New Year. Can't wait for the draft content. No, thank you, Oscar. Appreciate it. Scott Nance, as a Steelers fan, it pains me to admit, but Ben has regressed and isn't a top 15 quarterback anymore and might retire. What do you think the Steelers should do at quarterback? Draft one, trade up in the draft, sign a QB, trade for a QB. Well, they're very competitive. You don't want to roll in next year with your Drew Locks of the world. You don't want to roll in with, Jamie Newman as a second-round pick as your starter. You could go the veteran route, sign Brissett, Fitzpatrick, or did Fitzpatrick retire? I can't remember. You could go the veteran route. You're not getting a great quarterback there. You could go the Mac Jones route. I think that's very fascinating. I from what I've seen from Mac Jones, I'm not crazy about him, but he seems like maybe could be a starting caliber player. You could go that route. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you could trade for your Wentz or your Darnold. I don't know if you want them starting right away necessarily, maybe Wentz, but I don't think the Eagles are going to trade Wentz across the state to Pittsburgh. But your best bet is, I personally think Big Ben comes back. That's kind of my opinion there. But they need some upside and future upside at that quarterback spot. From Eric Halverson, how complex is Brandon Staley's defense, and how is it not two-gapping? From what I've heard people describe, it sounds the same. How is it not two-gapping? I don't fully understand your question. But as far as how complex of a defense it is, it does not seem particularly complex to me. I think they do some creative ways to scheme up Aaron Donald to create one-on-ones. They do loop their edge rushers a lot. But they run a lot of cover four. They kind of keep everything in front of them. Not a lot of complex match defenses. In general, there's not a lot of complex defenses, in my opinion, out there. I think defenses are a lot more straightforward. When you really boil it down, I think some teams are pretty complex. You look at I think the Belichick defenses are pretty complex with the way they drop their edge rushers into coverage. I think the Ravens, with a lot of their zero pressures, is pretty complex, but even a zero blitz is pretty straightforward. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just don't have a great answer for that question as far as the two-gapping. I don't fully understand what you're asking there. Maybe shoot it back to me. Would you consider going back, make videos reacting to older draft grade videos? Yes, I do. I did that last year. I plan on doing it again. I like to give them 2 years to brew. So it is time to do a regrade of the 2019 draft. But 2020 draft won't come till this time next year. From Spencer, what has been your biggest surprise from the 2020 NFL season? I'm going to go with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Pretty straightforward. I like Josh Allen. I did not see him becoming a consensus top 5 quarterback overnight. From Marshall Schneider, when evaluating an offensive lineman, how do you differentiate between whether he should fit better at guard or tackle? I look at foot speed. Foot speed is a big thing for me. When you play tackle, you need to get depth in your drops. And when you play guard, you don't. So, for example, I really liked Robert Hunt as a guard because I didn't think that he set quickly. I didn't think he got a lot of depth in his pass sets, and that's showed up at Miami. The whole arm length thing I think is very overrated. I do think there's something to be said about it, but I think footwork has proved to be much more important than arm length at tackle. So that's really the big thing I look for. And then just size, anchor. Anchor is important across the board, but Ezra Cleveland, for example, has kicked from tackle to guard. He did not have a good anchor at Boise State. He was a really fluid athlete, got depth in his drops, like I'm talking about, but struggled with power. And he struggled with power in the NFL. He's played guard. So that's an example of if you're a tackle to guard candidate, I want you to have an anchor. I want you to be like Isaiah Wilson or Robert Hunt, where you can set and take on a bull rush, because that translates more at guard. So I'm looking at, anchor
and low base and ability to absorb power is more important at guard. And I'm looking at your foot speed and how fluid are your traditional pass sets, or how fluid are your movement skills to develop that technique at tackle. From Micah Hunt, I think this is just a thank you note from Micah White for the content and changing the way you think about football. So thank you, Micah. I'm glad you enjoy the channel and everything. From Hunt, will your roster be uploaded on the new series of Xbox? Yes, I will get there. Come draft season, the new roster will be on Xbox Series X or whatever. But for now, you can, if you start your franchise on old gen, you can port that franchise over to the new gen. Just load up the file, use my roster, export the franchise file to the new Series X Xbox, and you can get my roster right now. From Ethan Moore. Mailbag question. For a quarterback that struggles with indecisiveness looking at fields, would working from under center be advantageous? Herbert seems to be processing at a higher level. I've never really thought about that. I could see the case for the technique of like a 7-step drop out of single back, or not single back, out of under center. I could see a theory that kind of just the mental process of having that 7-step drop and kind of having to see the defense as you drop and feeling the pressure as you drop back. I could see a case for why that might help. I don't know if I've seen anything from Herbert that necessarily makes that true, but it's an interesting theory. I've never thought about that. I could see the thinking behind that. From Canadian Falcon, I feel like you're much higher on Rondale Moore than the consensus. Is he on your list for film rooms? I actually tweeted about Rondale Moore yesterday that I ended up being lower on him after I evaluated him. I've got him as a late first, early second, comparing him to Curtis Samuel. I like what I've seen as far as his playmaking ability. He runs good routes when asked to run good routes, but he was not asked to do that very often. But I think I'm much more close to the consensus opinion on Rondale Moore after I truly evaluated him. From Tyler Gray, just Deshaun Watson question. Where do you see the best fits and worst fits? Do you see him ending up winning an MVP or perhaps a couple? MVP is tough. I mean, he definitely has the talent to do it, but so many things have to fall in place for you to have the narrative to win MVP. He is an MVP caliber quarterback, I will say that. As far as where he could go, I mean, so many of these potential trades getting floated out there are just preposterous. I mean, the report came out of Houston that is very true. Like, if you want to force Houston to consider trading Deshaun Watson, the conversation starts with an elite player, an elite young player, 3 first-round picks, and 3 second-round picks. That's where the conversation starts. And then you have to intrigue them with the opportunity to get another great quarterback. So there's only so many teams that could string that together. I think Miami is in position. Miami has the 3rd overall pick and Tua. So if you start there, you put in your other first-round pick this year, which you're kind of paying back the Texans with their first-round pick back. So that's 2 first rounds this year, including a top 3 pick. Tua, you're probably including your 2nd-round pick this year, your 1st and 2nd next year. That should do it if they have to trade Watson. I think Carolina could maybe pull it off if you offered Teddy Bridgewater, Brian Burns, and a combination of the 8th overall pick, 2nd rounder, 1st, 2nd next year. The Niners is a team that people have talked about. I think Nick Bosa has to be included if you're going to trade for Deshaun Watson. So you're probably talking about Nick Bosa, the 12th pick, your second round this year, first and second next year. It's that kind of thing. Like, you have to give up a ton to get a Deshaun Watson. A player like that just doesn't get traded. It's a unique situation. The Texans are not going to just bend over and trade him because they have to, especially the new GM coming in. Some of these trades getting thrown out there where it's like the Niners sending the 12th overall pick and, a second round next year. Like, are you kidding me? There's no way that happens. It starts with a lot to even start the conversation. But I think if it happens, I think Miami probably can put the best package together to actually convince them to do it. From SFT Yannick, do you think Seattle needs to fire Pete Carroll or Brian Schottenheimer? I talked about it at the beginning of the show, so I'm going to skip over that. From Geometric Heat, very broad question, but who are some of the most under and overrated players in the league? I still think that Lamar Jackson is overrated because so many people think he's a top 5 quarterback, which he's not. Underrated. You can make a case Aaron Donald is underrated. I mean, you got like unknown guys like Jesse Bates, very underrated. I think Eric Kendricks is underrated. Darius Williams for the Rams is underrated. I think Allen Robinson's pretty underrated. There's some underrated guys. Overrated guys to me tend to be quarterbacks. I think there's a slight bit of overratedness to TJ Watt's game. Just a tiny bit in that he's not the defensive player of the year. I don't even think he's the best edge player. I still think that Myles Garrett and Khalil Mack demand more respect and are better players at their position. There's just some names. From Trey Schneider, very last question here, guys. Could you further explain the difference between processing and decision-making? Yes, I would love to. So, the difference here for me, the way I evaluate, and this is different for a lot of people, but the way that I've come to this grading, because I have a processing grade and I have a decision-making grade. Processing to me is how do you play in structure? How do you read defenses? And how well are you making the correct read on your first read? So part of that can be considered decision-making is if your first read is a slant and it's bottled up, do you force it? That's, to me, still processing. Can you come off of your first read, get to your second read, and even beyond that, can you recognize that second read's bottled up and go through your process of the play design? That is, to me, processing. So you can actually, if you make bad decisions in structure, I'm actually going to hold that against your processor, if that makes sense. Decision-making is sort of how do you take care of the football when shit hits the fan? When that first read is bottled up and you've decided that you're not going to throw that ball, what do you do then? Do you take checkdowns? Do you scramble when you need to? Or do you try to do too much and get hit from behind and fumble? Do you force it into double coverage when you're playing off of rhythm? That's the big difference there. So I hope that answers your question. That was a great last question to end on. We're going to be right around the 2-hour mark. So this was a great show. Had a ton of fun recapping the week, getting through the mailbag. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button. If you're listening to the podcast version, I appreciate you leaving a review on iTunes especially. But anywhere you listen to the podcast, if you can leave a review, I appreciate it. Tell your friends about the show. Had a great time. Appreciate you guys for watching. I don't know when my next content will be. We're really in draft evaluation mode, which means I'm doing a lot less content creation and a lot more scouting and filling out the draft board and getting ready for the draft season. But as we go through the process, I'll have top 10 rankings videos coming out on YouTube, film rooms coming out on Patreon on a weekly basis. So lots of great stuff ahead. Excited for Wildcard Weekend, and we'll see you guys later. Peace out.